Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of Facebook Live. We're so excited to be able to spend a little time with you tonight and talk about whatever is on your mind. We're coming to you from the mansion in Salt Lake City. If you hear some piano music, I apologize. My daughter is practicing the piano, and it's the only time she had to do that. So hopefully it's not too loud or distracting. I'm very grateful to be able to spend a little time with you, since this is really the busiest time of the year for me and certainly for members of the legislature. For those of you that don't know, I'll share just a little bit about the legislative process and how it works in Utah. It's really different in every state. There are certainly some similarities, but some unique qualities to our legislative session. So first of all, we have one of the shortest legislative sessions in the entire country. It only lasts 45 days. And that is by design. It's in the Constitution, and I'm always grateful it's not longer. There's a little debate over whether we should have more time or less, but one of the things I like, and most legislators like, about the 45-day session is it really forces us to think strategically and to hopefully work on the most important things, and maybe some less important things will fall by the wayside, and that's okay. That 45 days starts usually the second week in January and ends the first week in March. And so if you're figuring out where we are, we're past the halfway point. We're on the downhill slide. This Friday we'll have 2 weeks left, and so we're getting close. But it also means that we don't evenly disperse the work. Certainly they are always working, but it feels like about 80% of the work takes place in the last half of the legislative session. Now, on average, they will pass 500 bills during that time. That's a lot of legislation, again, in a short amount of time. And that includes weekends, those 45 days. And so they're only meeting for about 33 days, 34 days. And that's a tremendous amount of work to do in a short time. Certainly mistakes happen, but they do incredible work. It's unless you've served in the legislature, it's almost impossible to understand how much stress there is during that time. How much time they actually put in, how many decisions they have to make in a very short period of time. It's not just voting on those bills. There will be over 1,200 bill files open. There will be several hundred bills that get drafted but fail. It's also important to understand the process, and I found that most Utahns really don't understand how that works. So of course we have the House and we have the Senate, and any legislation has to pass both of those bodies. There are 75 members of the House and 29 members of the Senate. So you have to have half of each one of those, 50 plus 1%, to pass either of those bodies. But even before they get to a vote on the floor of the House or the Senate, these bills have to pass a committee. Usually they have to pass 2 committees, although in the last few days of the session, they will often suspend the rules, so it only has to pass a committee in one of either the House or the Senate. But most bills will go through both the House committee, made up of Republicans and Democrats, in a similar divide as there is in the general body. So if you have 80% Republicans in the House, you'll have about an 80-20 split in the committees. And so once they pass the House committee, then they go to the House floor. If they pass there, then they go to the Senate committee, and then if they pass there, they go to the Senate floor. If any changes are made on the other side, then they actually have to come back and make sure the other body then has to vote on it again. If it doesn't pass the Senate, it has to go, or if it passes with a change in the Senate, it has to go back and be reapproved in the House. If they don't pass that change, then it will go to a committee from both of those bodies where they negotiate and try to come to a compromise, and then it goes back to a vote on the House floor and the Senate floor. So you can see that some of these bills will face as many as 5 or 6 votes before they even get to my desk, at which point I will have an opportunity to sign that piece of legislation or veto that piece of legislation. Now, if I veto it, that means it goes back to a vote of the House and the Senate again, at which point they will have to have 2/3 vote for them to pass before becoming law. There's one other thing I can do, and that is that I can decide not to do anything, not sign a bill, nor veto it. Some might ask, why would a governor do that? And it has been done in the past. The reason is say a bill passes with unanimous support of both the House and the Senate, but a governor doesn't like the bill, doesn't think it's a good policy, but knows that the veto would be overridden. So rather than requiring them to come back into session, a governor might choose just not to put but his or her signature on that bill as a way to signal to the legislature and to people throughout history that the governor was not in favor of that piece of legislation, but allowed it to go into law anyway. So no signature after a certain number of days, then it goes into law anyway. So that's just a little bit of background for those who may not know the legislative process. As you're following it and listening to what's happening, pay attention. If the media is making a big deal of a bill, but it hasn't even gone to a committee yet, or it may fail in committee, I always tell people to judge the legislature on what is actually passed and signed into law, not by what is proposed. Anybody can propose anything, but that doesn't mean it's going to become law. And if you're interested in a certain bill, follow it closely. And we're very fortunate in Utah. If you go to the legislature's website, it's le.utah.gov. That's the letters LE, as in the first two letters of legislature, le.utah.gov. And you can click on there, you can search for your representative or senator, you can search by bill, you can click on that bill and find out where it is in that process. You can see if it's passed in committee, you can see who voted for it, who voted against it. If it's passed the House or the Senate, you can see what the vote totals were there and who supported it, who didn't. You can actually watch the proceedings as they're happening. There are video cameras in every room. We have one of the most accessible legislatures anywhere in the country. So you can watch it being debated in the committee, you can watch it and listen to it being debated in the House and the Senate. It's really fascinating, and I would encourage people to get involved in the process. And if you have some time, come up here and watch the sausage being made. It's fascinating. You can go up into the gallery, you can listen to the debates, you can go into committee hearing rooms, and if you're interested in weighing in, you can actually participate during the committee meetings. You can go in there. There's always time for public input. You can go in and share why you're in favor of a bill or opposed to a bill. It's really a complicated process, but it's a brilliant process, and still the very best way to make laws and get things done. So I just want to thank our legislators and especially their families who are spending 45 days apart and working so hard. So with that, I'm excited to answer some questions from you. We've had dozens and dozens of questions that were submitted ahead of time. You're welcome to submit questions on Facebook right now. We'll get to as many of them as possible. We usually end up with hundreds of questions and only get a chance in our time together to answer a few of those. But I've got 3 that were submitted ahead of time, and we'll kind of go ahead and jump right in. So the first question was submitted anonymously and asked this. You recently recognized Utah's influx of new residents and next told them, please don't try to change who we are. What did you mean by this? Are you saying new residents should only vote for Republicans? So I did say that in my State of the State address a little over a month ago. And that's not what I meant at all. Of course, I didn't mean that everyone should vote Republican. There are lots of people here who are not Republicans or vote for other candidates. I always encourage people to vote for the best possible candidate. What I was really referring to there is something that we're proud of, and I talked about this in my State of the State speech as well, and that is our ability to work together, our ability to try to solve some of the most combative and difficult issues by coming together. Utah's been recognized. It's not just us recognizing ourselves. We've been recognized nationally many times as the most collaborative state in the nation. When I talked about that process where almost 500 bills or more than 500 new laws will be passed every year, close to 90% of those bills will be passed with unanimous or near unanimous support. And that's really incredible. When you look at what's happening in Congress, there are very few bipartisan bills. If you look at what's happening in many states, there's very little bipartisan support where people work together. And so that's one of the things that we certainly encourage when you move here is to understand how important that is for us. We've been recognized as a national model with several, again, very divisive topics. I said 4 or 5 years ago, I forget exactly when it was, we were able to pass some really groundbreaking legislation that protected religious freedom in our state and also offered protections for our LGBTQ community in housing and in the workplace. It's a model that Congress is looking at. It's a model that Arizona, there's some legislation in Arizona right now that they're trying to pass. That's the type of thing I mean when I say don't come in and try to make us exactly like where you were. Another example of this is that Utah leads the nation in charitable giving and volunteerism. And we encourage people, religious, not religious, it doesn't matter, whoever you are, whatever you bring with you, we encourage you to work in your community, to get to know your neighbors, to find connection. That is something that matters here in Utah, to learn about the history of our state and some of the incredible things that have made us who we are. Try to understand what it is that attracted you to Utah and try to make sure that we keep that the same. So that's really what I was referring to there. But thank you for the question. Question number 2, this was submitted by David, and David said, with so many Utahns wanting to go away from daylight savings time, why can't this get passed? This is an idea that gets brought up every year. And I, like you, David, I don't like daylight savings time. I don't like the switching back and forth. The historic reasons for that no longer exist. And despite what people say, it was not farmers that made this happen. Farmers really don't care. Farmers work from sun up till sundown, and it doesn't matter what time it is when the sun comes up and the sun goes down. Had nothing to do with farmers. It actually had more to do with the wartime effort and energy savings at the time. And so there really is no reason for daylight savings anymore, except that we're all doing it, and that's kind of the way it is. So we have 2 options. One option is to basically fall back and stay where we are. That's where it is now, where in the winter months, where it gets dark earlier and gets light a little earlier. Now, most Utahns don't like that one, although there are some that are very passionate about it. They think that that's exactly how it should be. And some of the arguments for that are that we don't want it really dark when kids are going to school early in the morning. And we could change that by changing when school starts. Some districts have already done that. There's a lot of evidence around starting schools later that it's actually better for kids. But some schools, like my daughter's school, still starts very early. We have to leave at before 7 o'clock every morning to get her to school. And it's still dark a little bit when the time changes, but it's getting lighter all the time. So that's one argument. Most Utahns, including me, this Utahn, would prefer to spring forward and stay sprung and stay forward. This allows for more light after work, lighter times in the evening, and that's certainly what is supported by the recreation industry and others out there. And again, most Utahns prefer that. So that's where it is in the summer months. Most people like that version of where we are, and it's the version we'll be going back to very soon. However, so here's the complications. If we decided to fall back and stay there, we could actually do that. The legislature could actually do that. But to spring forward, we need congressional approval to do that. And several states have been working on that. We actually did pass a bill around this that would allow us, if other states around us also move forward. That's one of the complications, is that you end up in a time zone, and other than Arizona, in our time zone, that sometimes in our time zone and sometimes in the Pacific time zone, if you're the only state, it can really throw people off and throw off work in surrounding states. And so we will see, if more and more states agree to go to that model, there's a chance that we would be able to move it forward. I know we did have Senator McKay is running a bill this year around springing forward and staying there. Not sure if that's going anywhere, but we'll certainly keep an eye on it. All right, let's go ahead and jump into a question. We have another question now. This is from Kenan on LinkedIn. What is Utah's long-term plan for
affordable housing, given we have one of the fastest growing populations and one of the fastest home appreciation rates and lagging wage growth. So thank you, Kenneth, for this question. This is something I addressed in my State of the State address as well. It's something that I'm very passionate about. We have to do more to lower the cost of housing here in our state. And there's really only one way to do that, and that is to increase supply, right? This is very simple economics. It's supply and demand. We can't stop the growth that's happening. States have tried that before. It's impossible to do. First of all, we have lots of kids, and that's what I'm worried about. I'm less worried about people moving here than I am about the growth, making sure our kids and grandkids can live here. Now, there have been places like California. This is when I say don't turn us into where you left. This is one of the things I'm talking about, where they've completely eliminated new housing permits, the building permits. They're just not building or permitting any new housing. And the thought was, of course, that would slow growth and that would improve things. And it had the exact opposite effect. All it did was significantly increase the price of housing and make it impossible for kids and grandkids to live there. So we have to do the opposite of that. We have to make sure that in very smart ways, very strategic ways, that we are able to increase supply. And that's what we're working with the legislature. We're working with the League of Cities and Towns, which is made up of mayors and city council members, to see what government can do. Government is often responsible for slowing the opportunities for building because we want to grow in smart ways, and that's perfectly understandable. But we can do this in better ways. We can have density. And some people are fine with density. Not everybody wants a quarter-acre lot or half-acre lot. And so for those that want density, we can do that, but we have to do it in places where we have infrastructure, so it doesn't clog up our roads and lower the quality of life. We can do that around track stations, and we have a bill that was passed before and another one that's coming forward this year that will help us do that, where people can ride mass transit. We don't have to cause a heavy burden to infrastructure. So we can do some density there. We have to do better with water conservation, making sure that we have water available for those new homes that are coming into our state. We have several bills that are making their way through the process right now to be able to do that. Now, for very low income individuals, we also need some help there to help with our homeless population and make sure that we don't increase our homeless population. And that's why we've also submitted, as part of our budget, to the legislature, a proposal for about $228 million to help with low income, affordable income housing in the state. I met with the Speaker and President tonight. We talked about some of that and feel very good about the ability to get some of that funding. We built some of those just today. I was at a permanent permanent supportive housing building called Pamela's Place, named after Pamela Atkinson, who is one of my senior advisors, an incredible woman who is from Great Britain, who came to Utah many years ago, and her plight has been to help the homeless. And in this place, there are 100 units. It's something that was just finished several months ago. We have 100 people who have been able to get off the streets, who are getting medical attention, getting mental health counseling and help with addiction, and getting back on their feet and having a place to stay. So all of those things are important, and we're working to make sure that Utah remains a place where everyone can come, and our kids and grandkids can stay and can thrive. So thank you for that question. Okay, we have another question here that came in, and let's see. This came from LinkedIn as well, from Derek. What are some of the priority bills that you are paying attention to? So there are a few. I've mentioned a couple of them already. One are the water conservation bills. You may have seen an article that came out, I believe it was yesterday, in the Deseret News. There was a New York Times piece on this. It was a study that was done, I believe, in California, and it shows they've been able to go back through historic rock formations and trees. Tree rings and look at drought over time. And we're able to determine that the drought that's occurred in the West over the last 20 years is the most serious drought since the year 800. That's 1,200 years ago that we're talking about. That's how serious our drought is. Just today, we had members of the legislature. We got them on some of our National Guard Black Hawk helicopters to fly out over the Great Salt Lake to really get a bird's eye view of how that has shrunk over the past few years. And it was incredibly impactful. And for those wondering, by the way, not costing taxpayers extra dollars to do that. These were training hours that the pilots have to fly. And so we decided to use those training hours to help fly these legislators out there. And even legislators who thought they understood the problem, seeing the magnitude of it from that aerial view was really impactful for them. And so these water conservation bills are hugely important, and they seem to be moving. So we're excited about that. We also have a tax cut bill that I'm excited about. $200 million tax cut that includes an income tax cut. It includes an earned income tax credit for low and moderate income individuals in our state. And another piece that I'm really excited about, it's an additional Social Security tax cut on top of the Social Security tax cut that we gave our seniors last year. I'm proud to say that bill has already passed the legislature, and I've already signed it into law. One of the first bills that we were able to get done. And anytime we can get money back into the pockets of Utahns, I think that's a win for the legislature and for us. And finally, the last piece I will be working on and looking forward to are significant increases in education funding. That was part of what I proposed. It's part of what I talked about in my State of the State address. Our teachers have worked so incredibly hard over the past 2 years. We are still underpaying our teachers, and we have some of the best teachers anywhere in the world right here in the state of Utah. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to compensate them and to get more money into education, especially into our low-income schools, our Title I schools in rural Utah, and in some of our multicultural schools here in the Salt Lake Valley and along the Wasatch Front. An opportunity to improve education every chance we get. Last week, I had an opportunity to volunteer as a substitute teacher for 3 of the 4 periods that teacher taught during the day. She was out with an illness and didn't know I was going to be her substitute teacher, prepared as if it was a regular substitute. And I felt very fortunate to be able to step in there. It was incredible. I loved it so much. I learned so much. I hope the students learned something while I was there. It was incredibly demanding. I was exhausted at the end of the day, and I've always had a great respect for our teachers, but my respect for them doubled that day easily. And I just want our teachers to know how much we love and appreciate you. And hopefully we'll be able to show that at the end of this legislative session. So thank you for that. Okay. Another question. Someone anonymously asked this. Governor Cox, we have some of the worst air in the nation. A lot of that bad air comes from driving too much. Why do you continue to personally add to this problem by driving hundreds of miles to work every day when the state has a beautiful governor's mansion that could house your family? Your motorcade makes it all much worse than it needs to be. Clean air should start at the top. Please explain. I appreciate that question. So to answer, first of all, let me talk about the air in our state, and then I'll talk personally about my situation. So the best news of all, and I promise this is true. Even the Salt Lake Tribune has reported this in the past couple of weeks. Our air is cleaner now than at any time in any of your lifetimes. It's amazing what has been accomplished because industry has improved the air quality so much. We have moved Governor Herbert. This was a major priority for the Herbert Cox administration when I was serving as lieutenant governor to switch to Tier 3 gasoline, and all but one of our refineries now has switched to Tier 3 gasoline, which burns much cleaner. It's the equivalent, if you have Tier 3 vehicles and Tier 3 gasoline, it's like taking 4 out of every 5 cars off the road. That's how much cleaner it is now. and our inversions are much cleaner. Now, inversions happen no matter what. Inversions have nothing to do with pollution. Inversions have everything to do with geography and weather. So we have mountains on each side. When a low pressure is here and a high pressure moves in, that cold air gets stuck underneath that high pressure bubble. And that's when we have days that are sometimes nicer in Park City than they are in Salt Lake City. That's an inversion, and it means everything underneath that is getting trapped. That happened before there were people here. It happened when the Native Americans were here. They called this the Valley of Smoke because of that. So all of that pollution is going to get trapped here. We will never be able to change that. All we can do is make sure that the air is cleaner during those inversion months so that we can keep the air as clean as possible. And that's what we've been doing. We've seen a significant increase in cleaner air. It's about 40% cleaner now than it was just 10 to 15 years ago. Which is remarkable, but we still have a long ways to go. And so some of the things that we're doing, we're working on incentives for businesses to replace their fleets with cleaner burning and specifically, especially with electric vehicles. We're talking more with the legislature about how we can do more incentives for electric vehicles. We are investing in electric vehicle infrastructure. One of the reasons people don't buy electric vehicles is because of fear of not having charging stations, especially if you have to drive long distances. So we've been putting in charging stations. We will be investing more over the next year in charging stations throughout rural Utah and in places where there are gaps. And so those are incredibly big improvements. The last one that I'll mention is we passed last year, and we're going to fund it even more this year, and that is double tracking front runner to make it more reliable. So instead of every half hour, you'll be able to catch a front runner train every 15 minutes. That will get more people using mass transit. I want to congratulate the mayor of Salt Lake in her work with UTA to make February free fare February. So right now you can ride public transit without paying anything here along the Wasatch Front, and appreciate all the mayors that helped getting involved to make that happen. It's making a huge difference. Now, in my personal situation, I can tell you that while I was lieutenant governor, I did live in Fairview, and I drove back and forth every day. I don't do that now, so we do stay here in Salt Lake during the week, and then go back home to Fairview on weekends. So we're doing what we can to reduce those emissions, to drive less, and I appreciate the question and appreciate everyone who is doing their part to help reduce those emissions. All right, let's go ahead and jump on to the next question. Let's see. Okay, here we go. We have a question from Danny on Facebook. What's the state's plan for services for people with disabilities? As a caregiver, we are losing staff faster than we can hire because of wages. And that is exactly right, Danny. And I will tell you, it's not just happening at DSPD, but it's certainly happening in other areas across the state. With this inflation that we've seen, and unfortunately, it's the worst inflation since I was about 5 years old that we're seeing across the country, and those rising prices. We're seeing a lot of inflation as well when it comes to labor and employment. Now that's good news for some people who are making more money now as wages are going up, and as a state, we also have to increase wages now, and I can't do that on my own. That's where I need the help of the legislature, and so we have submitted in our budget significant increases for state employees that are severely under market wages. And we did a market study. We've looked at every position in the state to understand where we have the biggest gaps, and the caregivers, that's one of the areas that you mentioned where we do see some of those significant gaps. So we have proposed significant increases to help retain the incredible caregivers that we have, working with people with disabilities, working in our state hospital, working in all of these areas that are so very difficult. I have assurances from the legislature that we will get those increases, and hopefully we can help again keep people here and encourage new people to apply for these jobs. So I appreciate that question. Thank you so much. Okay, let's see. Another question. We've probably got time for a couple more questions. Let's see. Chris submitted a question that says, I travel often for work and I'm never sure if I will be in Utah on election day. As such, I've used a permanent absentee ballot to make sure I'm able to vote. What are you going to do to make sure I'll be able to use absentee ballots in the future? So one of the things that we believe in, and I think most of you know, I served as lieutenant governor prior to becoming governor. In our state, in most states, they have a secretary of state who deals with elections. We don't have a secretary of state anymore. We got rid of that position in about 1975 and created the lieutenant governor position, who acts as a secretary of state and oversees elections. And so now that baton has been passed on to Lieutenant Governor Henderson, who's doing an incredible job working on elections. And one of the things I'm most proud of here in the state of Utah is that over time, we've been able to implement vote by mail for those who want to use vote by mail, and keeping voting in person for those who want to vote in person. We've also been able to do it in a way that is incredibly secure. And every year, as Lieutenant Governor, I worked with our clerks, worked with the public to find new ways to improve the security of our elections, constantly making sure we're learning and improving, making them more secure. And we have shown, studies have proven that we have some of the most secure elections anywhere in the country. And even this year, Lieutenant Governor Henderson and the clerks have a bill that will do even more to enhance election security. And we invite any of you who have concerns about that to go and visit your county clerk. They will take you in. They will show you exactly how elections are done. They can show you how they process the ballots, how they maintain the security of the ballots, all of those things. And so we're working on this bill to make that happen. It just passed out of committee today. We feel very good about it, and that will allow us to maintain vote by mail and make sure we still have the most secure elections anywhere in the country and anywhere in the world. Okay, it looks like we are about time to wrap up. I've got one last question here from Angela on Facebook, and she says, let's see, in being such an advocate for teachers in your campaigning, what is your outlook or stance on the controversial education bills being discussed this session? Thank you, Angela, for that. There are several bills, some of them controversial, some of them less controversial. Let me just kind of answer broadly. I'm very concerned about about our teachers, and I don't just mean that in kind of a condescending way. I mean it sincerely. As I've talked to teachers, and I have family members that are teachers, there is incredible fatigue out there, more than I've ever seen before. Teachers who have carried so much weight. I'm very proud to say, we were one of the first schools, or one of the first states, to return to in-person learning. We were at the very front edge of that. We kept students out of school the least of any state in the nation. And that return came with a price, and that price was borne and carried by our teachers. You have sacrificed so much to keep our kids in school, which was so important. We've seen the learning gaps that are happening in other states. We're now seeing Democratic governors and Democratic mayors who sound like Republicans saying we've made a huge mistake by keeping our kids out of school. And so I want to thank you. I worry that sometimes national politics, not sometimes, all the time, national politics bleeds into our local politics. So if something controversial happens in another state, suddenly we feel like we have to run 10 bills to fix that controversial thing that happened somewhere else, when it's not happening here. Or if something like that happens here, for example, last year we did have a teacher who was very much out of line, who was very derogatory, and was telling kids political views, saying that she hated people that were Republican or that voted for the president, and that she was not going to have any of that. Incredibly inappropriate. So you might think, wow, we need to run a bill to make sure that doesn't happen. Well, that teacher got fired, and that was the appropriate response. So we took care of that. So I sometimes worry that we overreact to things that are happening elsewhere, and I think we have to be very cautious, especially in this environment. We already had a teacher shortage before COVID. And I'm very worried. I hear it from teachers all the time that they're tired, they're done, they're going to find something else to do, and we have to keep our teachers. And so I'm working with the legislature legislature to try to change those bills, to get rid of those bills, to make them better, to help teachers and parents understand what is really happening in our state. Now, I want to say something else, though, and this is important. Our parents must have a say in their child's education. That is foundational to our education system and always has been. And so I appreciate teachers who do work with parents. That doesn't mean that one parent gets to decide everything that's taught in a class. That's not what that means at all. But it does mean that parents should know what's being taught in class. And the best way to do that is to be close to our kids. I talk to my kids every day about what they've learned in school. We have discussions, and if something controversial happens in class, we talk about it. And then we have an open dialogue with our teachers. We try to connect during parent-teacher conference. We've emailed teachers before, and they've been incredibly responsive. And that's how we solve problems. We don't have to run legislation every time something happens that we disagree with, or every time something happens that we're worried about. We can work through these things at the local level, and we can support our teachers. And so I'm hoping that the legislature will understand this moment that we're in, and even something that may not be that problematic or may not be that controversial, may not be the right time to do it right now, but that we will work to support everyone and help make the state a better place, so that parents have a say in their child's education, so that parents can be more involved in an education. Every teacher I know says to me, I wish our parents were more involved. That's a positive thing. And that we can make sure that our teachers, our educators, and our administrators have the support that they need and the funding they need to continue to provide a world-class education. We can do this. We really can do this together. So thank you for that question. Okay. I want to end just by thanking you all for joining us tonight. I hope this has been helpful. We try to do these and try to connect. I'm out. I visit a different county every month, and we're spending a lot of time there, but it's so important to be able to engage and answer questions and reach as many people as possible. And this is one way we can do that. I appreciate that. Before I finish, I want to plug one thing. It's something new that we're doing. It's our first annual Spirit of Service Award. I mentioned earlier that Utahns are known. We lead the nation when it comes to volunteerism and service every year. And so we want to recognize the people in your communities and in your sphere of influence that are truly service oriented. And so we need you to nominate those people for that Spirit of Service Award. You can do that by the deadline to submit is March 4th. So we've got a couple of weeks. I would encourage you to log on and nominate someone. And you can do that at my website, which is governor.utah.gov. That's governor.utah.gov. You click on the Spirit of Service Award and make a nomination there. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you had a wonderful Valentine's Day yesterday. I hope you've enjoyed this nice weather. Keep praying for rain. Keep praying for snow. We desperately need more of that water to come into our state. So don't forget that piece of it. I hope you have a wonderful President's Day weekend as we remember our founding fathers. We remember President Washington, and thinking back, we celebrated President Lincoln's birthday a few days ago. Remember those people who made such a difference in our lives. I hope you enjoyed that weekend together. COVID's going down, getting rid of all of those restrictions and regulations, everything going back to normal, and it can't come soon enough. Thank you so much and have a good night.